This is such a fun talk. I really enjoy this talk. And so I'm really excited that we get to do this today. We're going to build a DevOps pipeline live on stage. We're also going to containerize an app on stage. And here's the part where I tell you, I am definitely going to post the slides on my site tonight. Have you heard that today? Did it work? Which is why you can find the code for, which is why this talk has no slides at all. None. But we're going to live code everything. Here's the code that we're going to build today, so you can download that right now. Actually, we're going to build it and push it up there. But it's going to be on GitHub, which is really cool. The URL to get there, you can go to robrich.org, robrich.org. Click on presentations here at the top. And here's Level Up Your DevOps. That'll get you straight to the GitHub repository. We've talked about what is me. Here's me. But let's talk about Level Up Your DevOps. Now, this is an empty repository with a few exceptions. One of the big exceptions is that I came in here to Settings, and I chose Secrets, and I typed in all of the secret things. So that's pretty much all that I've done to this repository so far. And we're going to do the rest. Did I delete? I did. Excellent. So we're here in this empty directory, and let's scaffold up a website. Now, I would love an Express generator or a Next generator, and I haven't found one, so I'm going to .NET new, and that will get us a website here. I would love to be able to do this in Node instead, but we'll also get to see some really cool multi-stage build stuff. So I've got a website here. It's an MVC website, so we have controllers. Here's my home controller. And we have views. Here's my home view. And it says, welcome to UtahJS. Sweet. Now that we've got a website, let's see if we can get it up on GitHub. So our first step with that is a git ignore file. .git ignore, and here's where we type things like node modules and let's be a little bit more scientific than that. There's 5 things that we want to ignore in a git ignore file, 5 categories. The first is downloaded content. If we download it and then commit it to our repository, then we're just bloating our repository anytime something changes. Next one is built content. Have you ever checked in your dist folder? Did you ever live it down? The next one is user-specific files. All the temp files. You may have different preferences than me, and I don't want to inflict mine on you, and so we'll go there. The next one is temp files, and the last one is secrets. So let's kind of fill this out. In a node project, this would be node modules. In a .NET project like this, we don't have anything, which is kind of cool. Built content, the dist folder. Now there is a folder in here that has dist, so bad things could happen there, but we'll come back to that one. Bin and obj fit in here. User-specific files, star.suo, star.vs. We can argue about if we want to do the .vs code folder or if those have team defaults that we kind of want to keep. .idea. .ds store fits here, or actually I think that one nicely fits into the temp files. We'll have star.tmp, star.back, star.sql, star.zip. Have you ever checked in a zip backup of something? Yeah. And then secrets, we have our .env file. And in a .NET project, we also have this app settings JSON file. Now, I could create secrets like, let's say we have, GitHub Copilot knows where we're going. There's that secret, and we don't want to check that into source control. So I'm going to say use envvars. Now my app will nicely blow up on me when I go to use it, and it'll go, oh, yeah, I didn't set the environment variable. Here in appsettings.development.json, we might put that there as well. So I'm going to say use user secrets. Now that's a cool mechanism to be able to get it out of my project. If I come in here to my CS proj and I say manage user secrets, I have a nice extension for that, the .NET user secrets there. It will then set my thing. Now it doesn't need to be a GUID, it just needs to be a string. So I'll say level up dev ops, pop it open again, and now we can see that that's where the secret goes. And we can also see that it's in my app data folder, it's in my user profile as opposed to inside my source control directory. Great, so we got secrets out of here. And so those are the 5 things that we want to ignore from source control. Downloaded content, built content, user-specific files, temp files, and secrets. Yeah, that's entertaining. So we've got a git ignore file. Now let's containerize this app. The next step I want to do is I want to create a .docker ignore file. Now a Docker ignore file has pretty much the exact same syntax as a git ignore file, with one notable exception. So we can basically start with our git ignore file and just copy it into place in our Docker ignore file. Perfect. Now we have that downloaded content, built content, user-specific files, temp files, and secrets, and the 6th section is non-production files. We want to not put non-production files into our container, and so we'll ignore that section too. In this case, we've got app settings.development.json, and to that end, app settings.anything.json that isn't production. And we also have this launch settings.json, which is all of the environment variables that we would use to debug. So launch settings.json. And here's where the difference between a Docker ignore file and a git ignore file comes out. A Docker ignore file will only look at the root directory, where a git ignore file will look in any directory. So we might want to say, well, recursively through any directory. So to that end, we probably want to do this in all of the sections. And so let's do that here and here and here. And I'll leave it to the reader to fill out the rest of that Docker ignore file in any directory. Cool. So now we have a Docker ignore file. These are all the things that will never end up in our container ever, even if we specifically copy it. I hope it saves you the hour that it took me to figure out why that file wasn't copying straight away. Next up, we have a Dockerfile. Dockerfile. Now it's important that this be named Dockerfile and not Dockerfile.txt. So if your IDE helped, then easy enough, rename it to just Dockerfile, and now we've got that ready to go. Now I have the Docker extension here in VS Code, so I have cool icons. But here in a Dockerfile, we have 4 main verbs: from, copy, run, and cmd. Now there are other commands, and we will see some of them today. But these are the 4 main commands inside of a Dockerfile. With these 4 commands, you can probably read and write most Dockerfiles. From, we want to stand on the shoulders of giants. Let's head over to Docker Hub, and let's take a look at what we can do. So here we'll search for .NET here, and we'll land on this repository that will give us how we get to other repositories. Samples is great, lots of different Docker files. The Aspire dashboard and monitor are great for being able to look at .NET apps. Runtime deps is everything you'll need to install .NET, but .NET isn't installed yet. Built on top of that is runtime that allows us to be able to run console apps, but not web servers. Built on top of that is the one that allows us to run web servers, but not compile. And built on top of that is the one that allows us to compile. So let's pop open that one, and let's go get our base image. It's this one, and we can take a look at the tags, which unfortunately are no longer listed here. They invite us to link off to the Microsoft registry, and so here we can see that if we search by Alpine, we can find the 9.0-Alpine one that is significantly smaller than the default one that is based on Debian. So let's do that. From this dash Alpine, and now we have the build tools in our base image. Cool. So let's copy everything from the directory where we run our Docker build command into the directory inside of our image. What directory is that? Well, let's say work dir is /src. Now we could make it var bin foo bar, and it will definitely go create all of those directories and cd into them. But src is sufficient in this case. A lot of Linux file systems will create lots of different mounts. In a container, we only have one, so I can move it right here. Great, we copied everything, except for everything we chose to ignore here, into our image. Now let's run some commands. Well, I'd probably run npm install, npm run build, npm run test, npm run publish, something like that. And in .NET, we'll do similar things. We'll say .NET restore, demo.sln, .NET build, -c release, demo sln, .NET test, in release mode, demo sln. Now it's important that I say release mode here because otherwise I'll get one release mode and one debug mode. Debug build, that wouldn't be great. .NET publish, C release, -o app, demo sln. Cool. So that's everything I would want to run from the command line to build up this app. So let's turn those into Docker commands. Let's run this one, and we'll run this one, and run this one, and now we've got Docker commands that will run those shell commands. Now we could definitely say and, but we'll come back to why that might not be what we need to do in this case. Cool. Now next we'll set the CMD. Let's say .NET level up DevOps .dll, and that will be in the app directory. We do want to set some environment variables. Let's say the URLs will set, nope, that's not it. ASP.NET Core environment is production. We'll expose this, and we'll also set the secret here, the connection string. So we'll set that, env connection strings IDB, and we'll set that to blank. Now I'm going to set this to port 8080, but we could set it to any port as long as it matches that expose. And so now we've set those environment variables that allow us to be able to fire up our app. Work dir, that would be an entertaining typo. Now this Dockerfile would work in production just fine, but let's take a look at some of the best practices that we have in Docker, and we can kind of tune this a little bit. One of the best practices is that we don't want build tools inside of our production image. Now in Node, our runtime is our build server, so there isn't really a great solution there. But in Node, we can do that. Let's go back to Docker Hub, and we can say, well, let's use the ASP.NET one instead of the .NET SDK one, and that will allow us to be able to remove the build tools from this. We could definitely build outside of our container, but that would kind of break that isolation that we want in an environment. So let's say from a build environment. We've now separated this build into two pieces. We have this top part that I'm going to call the build server image, and this one that is the production runtime server image. This one is our build server. It has the build tools in it. It has all of our source code. This is the production runtime one that only has those built assets. We could think of this as the dist directory together with the node modules folder. But we don't need all of those TypeScript files anymore. We've compiled those away. And why is it a server? Well, technically Technically, it's an image, not a server, but we can kind of think of it like a server. So thus I'll call it that server. The other interesting thing that we can think of is, okay, we're coding along and I just want to edit this JavaScript file. That's going to invalidate this layer right here, which will mean that it will re-restore my dependencies. Now that npm install, or in this case that .NET restore, that may take a while. And so can we do that this way instead? Let's restore the things first and copy the things second. Excellent. Well, I do need a manifest, so let's copy level up devops.cs proj into the current directory. Let's also copy demo.sln into the current directory. That gives us our manifest that we know how to restore our dependencies. But now if I'm just changing a JavaScript file when I'm building locally, I don't need to re-restore those dependencies. My build will run faster. Excellent. So we've done those two best practices where we get our source control, our source code out of our production container, and we leverage our layers better. And so should we compact these all into one layer? Well, we definitely could, but it's our build server, and we're about to throw that away once we do our production server. So, maybe not. Okay, so we've got our Dockerfile. We've got our Docker ignore file. We've got our git ignore file. Let's create a Kubernetes YAML file, k8s.yaml. And I'm really excited that I have this Kubernetes plugin right here that allows me to be able to automatically generate cool things, because given this Kubernetes YAML file, once VS Code knows that it is a YAML file, I can say, I would like a deployment, please. And it goes, how about this one? I didn't have to type that. That's cool. Level up DevOps. What is my image? Let's do ACR URL / level up DevOps. I'll also do image label there. Let's also put our image label here in version. And what resource limits do we need? That's fine. Port 8080, that happens to match the port that we chose here in our Docker file. And we can set some environment details. Yes, doing it from secret would be better, but I'm going to leave that to the reader. Connection strings, my DB will allow us to be able to set the details that we need to start up our app. Excellent. One more thing I want to add here. I want to say replicas. I'm going to do 1 in this case, and that will get us to where we need to go. Okay, so we've got our deployment. Next up, let's create a service. The service in Kubernetes will round robin autocomplete. Round robin redirect to all the pods that are running. In this case, I have chosen to only run 1. So the selector here is level up DevOps. The port is 8080, and the target port will be the same. So I can leave that one off. Cool. Next, I want an ingress. Ingress, level up DevOps. It will go to level up DevOps.aks URL. Another replacement expression we'll do in the build. And this will redirect to level up DevOps to port 8080. Excellent. Let's add some TLS information that'll be really fun. I've got Cert Manager running on my cluster, and so I'm going to go grab these details here, and we'll add that annotation saying we're using Let's Encrypt, and we'll add the TLS details. We'll also say that we're using the Nginx ingress controller. Cool. Now we do have some replacement expressions that we'll replace in our build. But other than that, this Kubernetes YAML file will deploy all those pieces. We could also deploy secrets. We could deploy roles and cluster role bindings and other things that we needed to make this app run in Kubernetes. But for now, I think that'll work. Let's do one more file. Let's do a readme.md, and let's add some readme content into place. So I think that gets us through the day. That's a decent readme that'll get us started. And let's now start to commit this to source control. Now remember, the things that we want to ignore in source control are 5 groups: downloaded content, built content, user-specific files, temp files, secrets. Are there any things in here that, oh, hey, I've got a bunch of content that I downloaded. I've got Bootstrap here. I've got jQuery validate for some reason. Let's go see if we can remove that. Let's come in here to the view that uses it, this layout.cshtml, and we've got a reference to Bootstrap. Well, let's use that from a CDN instead. So I'm going to come over here to CDN.js, and let's look for Bootstrap. We could also use Tailwind or another thing. Let's look for bootstrap.min.css, copy that link tag, and let's replace that in place here where we have that reference. So let's remove that one with the CDN reference. We can go back to CDN.js and go find the references here for Bootstrap and jQuery. And then we've also got some more content here. And let's replace those with CDN.js references as well. And now we've removed our need for this lib directory. We don't need those libraries locally anymore. We're using them from the CDN instead, which, by the way, resolves our dist conflict too. Excellent. So let's come back in here and let's look at the code that we want to commit. Refresh. Yep, that's looking a lot cleaner. We're not committing any built files, downloaded files, user files, temp files, or secrets. So I'll stage all the things. Level up DevOps. Breaking tradition. I guess the first commit is supposed to be called first commit. Sorry. And now let's git push origin main and come back over to GitHub. And if you've been following along at home, we now have the source code up in that spot that you can grab from robrich.org. Cool. We've got a website. We've got it containerized. We've got the Kubernetes details. Now let's get it to automatically deploy on every code change. I'm going to come in here to Actions, and there's lots of different things that we could do. We could start with a blank workflow that's just a completely empty file. Or there's various deployment options. We could go look for more. There's some security scans we could do, continuous integration things, automation, some static deployment things. I'm going to start with the simple workflow because this one is just enough to get us going, but not overwhelming to kind of take over our view of this. Okay, so we've got this build. Let's say Docker build and Kubernetes run. Okay, so let's trigger it on a push to the main branch. And we'll come back to pull requests if we have a moment. We'll do workflow dispatch, which gives us a nice build button here. Have you ever committed spaces just to kick off the build? Yeah, don't need to do that anymore. I am so glad. This build runs on Ubuntu. Excellent. And what are the steps that it does? Well, it starts by checking out all of our code, and then we can run various commands. If we have a single line command, we can do it this way. If we have a multi-line command, we can do it this way. So let's do that. Let's do a multi-line build that does Docker build and push, Kubernetes apply. So let's start that with Docker build. We'll tag it with level up DevOps and dot that current context that gets us into the right folder. Now, we do want to leverage this to get into our private repository. So what's that name? Well, we have this secret here, the ACR URL. Let's leverage that. Let's head over to the GitHub docs. How do we get at the secret here? We start by setting the secret. That looks great. And then we can leverage it using this syntax right here, where we say secrets and give it that secret name. Perfect. So let's add that secret, and this is ACR URL. And then we've got another secret, another variable that build provides, github.sha, that is the git hash of this. Okay, that's not a semver-versioned build. We could use the build ID instead or some other details, but this does help me identify what is the source code that built this version of the software. And we'll see how that can be really helpful going forward. Okay, so now that I've got this image built, it's going to do all of the Docker build steps. Let's Docker push this to my private registry. And now this is going to fail because we're not authenticated to our registry. So let's authenticate to our registry. I'm going to come in here and let's look for Docker login. Ooh, here's one. We can view the full marketplace listing that will give us all of the details of how we might use this task in all of the different places. We probably also have a reference to the GitHub repository where this action lives, or we can just grab this YAML right here that teaches us how to do it. Excellent. So let's set that in place, and we will have to play some indent games here to get the YAML to line up right. And now we can log into Docker. Now this uses the registry. What is that registry? Well, let's paste our secret here. We have an ACR URL. Perfect. What is our username? Well, we've got a secret for that too. Our ACR username. And password. ACR password. And we don't need to worry about ECR in this case. And then logout, we're going to say logout is true. Now this doesn't log out at the end of this task, but rather at the end of the entire build. Why is it important for us to log out? Well, if we have a shared host that is running other people's builds, then that shared host may get this secret. So maybe the next build kicks off and now we're logged in, the next build is logged into our private container registry. So we definitely want to clear that as the last step of our build. In this case, because we're using a hosted managed agent on GitHub, then it actually destroys our VM on the way out too. So we're good there. Okay, so we've Docker pushed that. The next thing we want to do, kubectl apply-f k8s.yaml, and we've got that into our Kubernetes. Yeah. Ooh, I'm missing the T in GitHub. Thank you. That would have been a fun build fail. I am missing the L. Cool. My keyboard is failing me today. Good catch. kubectl apply. Well, we need to log into our Kubernetes cluster as well. So let's come back in here and take a look at that. Let's look for Kubernetes set context. That one looks good. Let's go grab the YAML there and play indent games again. YAML is so particular about indenting. Cool. What is our method? Well, let's use kubeconfig. Now, I went into my user home directory and I said I would like the inside my .kube folder inside /config. I opened up this file, and of course I've redacted all the secrets, but I just grabbed this content from my local machine. This knows how to authenticate into my Kubernetes cluster, and I set that in place here in this kubeconfig secret so that now I can get at that and authenticate into my cluster in the same way that my local machine can. Perfect. So let's use that secret. We'll go secrets.kubeconfig. And because we've got that kube config, we don't need any of the rest of these parameters that talk to all of the different ways that we might authenticate. Now, I did very specifically here make sure that my current context was that context so that I didn't need to set that parameter either. Cool. So we're authenticated into Kubernetes. And so now we can, white space. Now we can run this. Well, we do have our replacement expressions here. We have the replacement expression to be able to set the AKS URL, the image label. And so let's go grab this expression that allows us to be able to set that. Now this is hairy, so I'm just going to copy and paste it into place. And then let's talk through what it does. Let's wrap. So we're going to sed into kdes.yaml. We're going to not back it up. We're going to go find the text ACR URL and replace it with the secret. We'll go grab the text AKS URL, replace that with the secret. Go grab the text image label and replace it with the GitHub SHA. Cool. If we wanted to do any more heavy lifting than this, we might want to leverage Helm that allows us to do really cool replacement expressions as well. Now, I'm going to do that here instead of here, because if I did this here, and let's say back in our Docker ignore file, somebody forgot to ignore the kdes.yaml file, then I would be baking these secrets into my production image. Which means if you were able to pop my container, you would be able to get at not only the production secrets, you would be able to get to the deployment secrets as well. So I'm going to do this after I've pushed this to make sure that those secrets, the production container is far away before I start messing with these secrets in this Kubernetes YAML file. Excellent. So we've got this build that will check out our code and then log into Docker, log into Kubernetes, and then finally push this, run the Docker build, push that code into place. Let's commit this file. I'm going to say, oh, I don't want to name it blank. Let's name it Docker Kubernetes YAML, and we'll commit this DevOps pipeline. Excellent. Now, it's just a file here in my repository. So if I wanted to, I could say git pull, and then with that in place, I can just come in here and continue editing that build. I can now just, it's one of the files in my repository. But because it's in my repository, and because it happens to be in .github/workflows and ends in YML or YAML, it will kick off a build. So let's take a look at that build. Has it failed yet? Oh, it ran. So it's going to do all of the details associated with building my image and pushing that into Kubernetes, running that content in Kubernetes. Did I? Yep. And so now if I go look at my cluster, kubectl get all, I will see that I now have that content running inside of Kubernetes where previously it was not. Cool. We've got that website. Let's go to that website and let's take a look at what we've got. Now, it may take a bit for DNS to run. It may take a bit for that the certificate to come across. So we can actually port forward into this web server instead. So we could port forward into a deployment. We could port forward into a replica set, or we could port forward into a pod or a service. Let's port forward into the service. kubectl port forward service. We'll point 8080 on our local machine to 8080 inside the container, and localhost 8080, and haha, we see nothing. kubectl get all. Did I crash my pod on startup? Oh, yep, crash loop back off. That's interesting. kubectl describe. Where did we crash? Level up DevOps. I see where my bug is. Right here, I did not copy my content into place. Let's copy the content from the dist folder. Let's rename this to dist. Into the current folder, now the app folder, and now I've got that. But now it's going to look over here for a dist folder, which we very specifically ignored. So instead, I'm going to say, let's copy this, -- from equals build, and we will rename this one as build. And now with that code change, we've got that content into place. Typo fix, commit, git push origin main, and let's take a look at that build. Cool. So now it's going to do each of those steps. We'll log into Docker and Kubernetes. We'll fire up our Dockerfile and do each of the steps there. And then we'll be able to launch that flip over into the new container and apply that into Kubernetes. Perfect. So how's our build doing? Well, it looks like we did a .NET build. Is that build going to succeed? Yep, our build succeeded. We have no tests, so we have no failing tests. And so then we'll push that into the other container and ultimately start it in Kubernetes. There, we've got that started in Kubernetes. So let's come here, kubectl get all. And now if we hurry, we can see it starting up. Oh, that's cool. Let's take a look at this. It's pending. Let's come back to our DevOps build, or our PR build rather. Now this build, we could definitely do things like if, and start talking about, well, is it this branch or is it that branch? Our PR build though is going to be significantly different. So let's just copy this, create a new one, and let's modify this. Docker build a PR. Well, this one will run on all the branches that are not main. And then let's also run on pull request on all branches. Now, why do we have two? Well, if we have internal collaborators, they're probably going to create a new branch within our repository and create a pull request there. If we have external collaborators, they'll probably fork the repository and build the branch in their repository, in their username, and then create a PR back to ours. So we'll have one for internal people and one for external people. Now, we don't want to apply this PR build into production, so let's remove that. Because we're doing that, we don't need to change the secrets. Because of that, we don't need to set the context. There's no need to log into a Kubernetes cluster we won't use. We also don't want to push this up to our container registry because we're not going to, we don't want to accidentally deploy this build later, which means we don't need to log into Docker Hub. To that end, we don't even need to set that secret there. Let's just say level up DevOps -PR. Cool. Docker PR.yaml. We now have a PR build. Cool. With our build, let's also go to here and we'll say, let me go grab a status badge. It will give us the markdown that we need. So let's pop open this readme.markdown and set that status badge right there. And now with that in place, let's take a look at this, committing our README, committing our Docker PR, PR build, and let's commit that. Now last time we pushed from the console, let's push this time from here, push that up to our repository. And we just changed things in our repository, which on the main branch, which kicked off a build as well. So last time we went in this way. Today let's go in this way, and we'll take a look at that build, and let's take a look at that. So we do our Docker login, we do our Kubernetes login. We're going to go pull down the base images, and now we'll do our build. Is our build going to succeed? Well, it looks like almost. Yep, we've got a succeeding build. We have no tests, so we have no failing tests. We flip over to our other image. We'll push that up to our container registry, and then finally we will start this in Kubernetes. Well, is the latest version running in Kubernetes? I don't know. Now, one of the things that we did here in our Kubernetes YAML file is we set the image label as one of the tags on our pod. So let's come in here and let's get all of the things, and let's take a look at this new pod right here, kubectl describe that pod, and we can see that that label is 6fcce, which, by the way, happens to exactly match the version of the software right now, 6fcce, right there. So we know that the latest version is deployed. This was a lot of fun getting to show you how to build a DevOps pipeline in GitHub Actions and also how to containerize a workload. The source code that we just built is now up on GitHub. You can grab that from robrich.org. Thank you for coming.